I am so grateful to have overcome devastating challenges over my lifetime. It's for this reason that I am passionate and obligated to share my faith, my hope, and my life. My faith is in God, my hope is in His promises, and my life is for this purpose. I am Yvonne Roundtree, and this is Everyday Matters. People of God, we have become conditioned to resist things that seem negative. But my pastor made a profound statement once when he said, sometimes we don't know if we're fighting against God or if we're fighting against Satan. And this is true. Perhaps because when we look through the Bible, we can find many accounts of God allowing hardships in the lives of His people in order to promote them. For instance, I recall when God allowed Satan, gave him permission to test Job, and afterwards Job was promoted. God's word says that trials will come to make us strong. And we don't know why we must go through certain things that we go through, but we can be assured that if we praise God through it, promotion will follow. I trust God to perfect everything concerning me, and you can too.
I've been a physician for over 25 years now, and as part of my journey, I've really always wanted to emphasize prevention. And my premise is that by providing people with knowledge, we're able to empower them to make choices. So, the choice that usually a lot of people face is whether they want to accept, believe, make the commitment, and then move forward. Now, those 4 steps are really very critical in any process, whether you're dealing with a chronic illness, dealing with an acute illness, or just dealing with a life situation. The ability to be able to embrace those 4. And that's where a lot of people tend to get stopped. So I'd really like to acknowledge you for taking that brave step and coming forward. Because for the most part, my experience as a physician has been that people just shut down. They become jaded. They become, how shall I put it? They become resigned. They just have this sense of resignation, like it's being done to them. Like I, as a physician or any other physician, may be doing something to them. Like, the doctor put me on these pills. We hear it all the time, right? Oh, they just put me on this pill because, they're being paid by the pharmaceutical industry. Yes, I'm sure you've heard that before, right? And then the slippery slope with things like fibromyalgia is that because a huge component of that is pain, it's very easy to just address the pain. In other words, begin to escalate pain medications. So you may have started out with just a non-steroidal or some Tylenol, Aleve, Advil, and then gradually, if you don't deal with those things that are going on up here in the mindset, your pain just becomes a symptom of what's stopping you, what's blocking you, what's not making you move forward. And so we begin to escalate those medications to narcotic analgesia, things like Norco, I'm sure you've heard of that, Tylenol number 3, the morphines. And that's such a slippery slope. And really, in my experience, people who end up going down that path do not end up empowered. They end up resigned. They end up really victims of the system, so to speak. So I really want to commend you for coming in. Now let me explain to you, Yvonne, what it is that I do. Because a lot of people may be kind of confused, like, wait a minute, what is it that she exactly does? And a lot of my work really, like you said, centers around women. And why women? Just like you said, we are the caregivers, right? We are the mothers, the sisters, the spouse, the companion. We also face the sandwich generation, especially as we begin to get older. We're not only taking care of our kids, but we're also taking care of older relatives. And what tends to happen is that we deplete our own self-care until we inadvertently burn the candles at both ends and end up with an emotional or physical illness. Now, I'm not saying that we are to blame for these things happening. I'm just trying to raise awareness of the importance of self-care. And I kind of alluded a lot to the story of the oxygen mask. Now, if you travel on a plane, right, a lot of times when we're settling down on the plane, we don't necessarily pay attention to the information that the flight attendant is saying to us. But one of the things that is very critical is that she says In event of a sudden loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Please be sure to secure your mask first before turning to assist others.
Yes.
And you know what?
Absolutely.
For those of us who have kids, I remember when I was traveling with my then 1-year-old daughter, and I heard that announcement, you know, just like I've heard it several times before. But on this particular trip, this was my first trip with my daughter, and I'm thinking to myself, they must be crazy. How dare they think that I'm going to attach my oxygen mask first before I turn to attend to my daughter, right? Because that's our natural instinct. We want to care for everybody.
Save other people.
But you know what? What's critical about that message there is because at the height of about 30,000 feet, which is the height of a commercial airplane, in event of a depressurizing in the cabin, there's loss of oxygen to the brain. And the brain is the most critical organ that cannot survive without oxygen for more than a few minutes. So if you don't attach your oxygen mask and begin to breathe, you won't even be coordinated enough to take care of those.
Anyone else.
Yeah. And that is what we tend to do in life as caregivers. We go through life, we're constantly grappling and trying to keep up with everything else, and we're not attaching that oxygen mask until we end up with a physical or emotional illness, or we're just depleted. It doesn't even have to be a manifestation of an illness. We're just depleted. And then suddenly life does not have a meaning. And so my message to women is that it's possible to have it another way. It's possible to define it another way. And that just being diagnosed with a chronic medical illness does not mean that it is the end for you. In fact, it's an invitation to now embrace that holistic lifestyle you alluded to when you came in. And what does that look like? It looks like different things for different people. Okay, so it's not a cookie cutter definition. It looks different for different people. And so I work with my clients to help them define what that means for them. What does that mean for you? If I were to ask you, what would embracing a holistic life look like for you?
Well, it would look like a balance, because right now things seem very unbalanced where I need to focus more on my health. I would like to continue or go back to incorporating the other things in life that I enjoy, you know, the other productive things that I consider, you know, a part of my life, a part of who I am as a person. So when I started to deal with the chronic conditions, my biggest problem was that I realized that I had to focus more on myself, on my health and medication and doctor visits and things like that. And I remember at one time I said, you know, I could be doing something else. I'm sitting here in this doctor's office. I'm going to all these doctor's visits. I could be doing something else. I need to be doing something else. I mean, I really thought that those other things were so important. Not realizing, like you said, if I'm not taking care of my health, I'm not going to be able to do those things. I mean, I've never been good with change anyway. So that's part of the problem. I mean, that's just not part of my character, as to change very quickly. I like things to be the same, and I like to be comfortable and that sort of thing. So all of that doctor's visit stuff was new to me. You know, I did my annual checkups. You know, but I was just once a year, and there was nothing complicated about it. You know, I went in, did the routine things, and it's like, okay, see you next year. And then all of a sudden there was this, you know, the symptoms and those other things, and like you said, the terminology that you all use to explain things, and that's why I get shut down also. You know, I change doctors. I'm like, I don't like what they're saying. You know, I would say things like they're talking crazy, and you know, I don't want to hear that. And so I just can look back and see all of the phases that I went through before I got to this point. So now I have a passion to help people to advocate for other patients, because there was a lot of frustration, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of disbelief, or as far as, I guess, just not trusting, distrust towards doctors and the system, so I've come a long way. So I don't know if I can honestly accept your commending me for this, because it was a process, and people like you helped. I came in contact with all kinds of people in the medical profession, and that's how I was referred to you. And so, that was my journey.
Yeah, well, you pointed out one very critical thing, and that is what we call taking responsibility, right? Being responsible for how you choose to react to any situation. And there's a choice here, right? You can either choose to be what we call at cause. In other words, hey, I'm owning everything, my feelings around this, what it is that the doctor is saying that I don't understand. I'm owning all this. I'm going to take ownership. I'm not going to put it on anybody. Versus being a victim, which is the easier way to be, right? They're doing this to me. This doctor put this, they spoke in a way I didn't understand. So the first step really is beginning to recognize those distinctions. And I work with my clients a lot on what we call distinctions. And what I mean by that is being able to be very, very clear about where you're coming from and how it's affecting your life, right? And I provide, very critical tools, because once you're able to recognize, oh, that thing I'm doing where I'm blaming everybody else and I'm the good guy, is that I'm not being responsible for the choices I'm making in my life. And taking back the power in your life is being responsible for everything that happens at every single time, if that makes sense to you, right?
Yes, it does.
That's a huge power shift. So once you own it, own 100% of everything that happens in your life, irrespective of whether you understand how you got there, that's the first critical step, right? Then the second thing that you mentioned, which is something that a lot of people have a problem with, is change. And I assert that I'm sure you lived on the planet long enough to recognize that change is inevitable, right? Whether it's dealing with a chronic illness, whether it's dealing with a job change, whether it's dealing with the transition of a parent, a relative, whether it's dealing with a transition in terms of location, change is inevitable. And so once we embrace that and recognize that, be responsible for it, like own it, like, hey, I have a problem with change, but I recognize that it's going to be inevitable, and begin to put tools in place, then we're better able to move through things like, a chronic illness, for instance. What are the adjustments I need to make in my life that I'm responsible for, that I don't feel victimized about. I don't feel that they're huge dramatic shifts. There's no drama to it. It takes a drama out of this change.
Yes.
So again, that's another distinction I work with with my clients, really recognizing that change is inevitable. Unfortunately, from the time we take our first breath until we transition the planet, change is pretty much what's going through every single minute.
Yeah, it's natural.
Yeah,
it's natural.
Yeah. So those are very critical distinctions, and once people get those two concepts, then we're able to begin to build on what it is that they have a future vision for themselves. What's your future vision? Where do you envision yourself in this process 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 5 years from now? How do you envision this whole life plan that we're talking about? So it's very exciting work. So
it is, and when you talked about empowering yourself, that's what I did, because that's where I got the motivation to want to help other people. I find myself now at the doctor's office, at the hospital, when I go in, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking like, oh, these poor people, I need to, can I help you with something, or can I, and I'm not thinking so much about myself, because I'm thinking like, well, compared to what they're going through, this is nothing. It's really not as bad as I thought. It is something, but it's not as bad as I thought, because now my thought process has shifted, to a place of empowerment where I can actually use it as a tool. I'm just grateful that I was even chosen by God to have this experience, so that I can develop the passion and compassion for other people, because I never knew what it was like, to have a chronic illness. I didn't even take aspirin. When I got a headache, it's like I would just lay down and rest. I had a problem with taking aspirin. So I thought that I ate well and I exercised. So, you know, when I was diagnosed, I'm thinking, this can't be, you know, how could this happen to me? I'm healthy. I'm doing all the right things. But it goes back to, like you said, realizing that here, you know, you become depleted in here.
Yes.
And there's so many ways that you can become depleted that we just take for granted.
Yes.
You know. So I just really am grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you.
You know, I have to actually commend you for the work that you're doing, because you stepped away from just the science of medicine, and now you're practicing the spirit of it.
Wow.
You know,
I've never had it put that way.
It's spiritual now. So
yes.
And it always was, but you know, as a scientist, we don't put all of that together. Well, I'm saying we as in us, but you, as physicians, don't put those things together usually. And it's a tremendous honor, you know, to have you in society. I see that the work that you're doing is going to help so many people. And I had the experience of sharing in a focus group that you did.
Yes.
And, you know, I saw how you asked certain questions about how we're feeling.
Yeah.
That was the biggest part of what you wanted to know, is what was going on. And like you mentioned earlier, we had to own our feelings, because that was one of the things I didn't do. I didn't admit that I was really hiding how I felt about my condition. You know, I didn't let even, you know, my husband know. So with that, can you share a little more about, I know that you have written a book on diabetes type 2, and you had some very specific things about the diagnosis of the type 2 diabetes that I wanted you to share.
Yeah, you know, just as an aside, you know, just so I highlight where the book came in. When I was working in private practice, I found, even before private practice, I'm sorry, just as a physician working in a group practice, I found that my diabetic patients were really the prototype of the kind of people who, when you informed them that they had diabetes, they had that reaction we talked about, you know, the rejection, you know, either they were not going to come back to the doctor because they didn't like the information they were given, they were going to go through that denial stage. And so I also found, particularly in the African American community, that there was this general sense of fear that once you were diagnosed with diabetes, you're going to get all those complications. They're going to cut off your feet, and you're going to end up on dialysis. I even actually had a patient tell me once that there was a conspiracy about, you know, dialysis centers in the city. And so somehow it became my passion to say, you know what, I want to dispel this myth. I want to dispel this assertion that, hey, once you get diagnosed with diabetes, inevitably you're going to end up with all those complications. And it's actually that stand that I took for my patients that took me to the field of professional coaching, because once I understood what coaching was and what I was trying to impact on my patients, I realized that just being in the coat, you know, was kind of a different dynamic than partnering with people as my clients and saying, hey, we're in this together, okay? And we're going to co-create this future for you. I'm going to use a lot of my medical knowledge, but you're going to bring forward what it is that you envision for yourself. And together we're going to marry that into this great plan that you own. I'm on the sidelines of your life. You're the player in your life, and you get to choose how it goes. Okay, so that's what coaching is really all about. And that is what you saw in the conversation. When I spoke a lot about how you are being and how you are feeling, it was how are you playing that game in life, right? What's going on? You know, how are you making your distinctions? I usually use a common phrase just, you know, as a way to allow my clients to check in with themselves on a minute-to-minute basis. When you made this decision, were you coming from love or were you making it from fear? Any decision at all. So if you check in, you know, when you're making a decision, are you making it from love or are you making it from fear? Love being all-encompassing, you don't necessarily know how, but you're just making it from that stand of, I am a stand for love and for greatness, versus fear, which is usually constricting. It's all about you. You're trying to protect yourself. And so I usually like to help people understand when I talk about how they're feeling and how they're being. That's what I'm really looking at.
Okay.
Well, that's what I'm really looking at. And then when we expand that into your entire life and what you're envisioning for yourself, your entire health as a whole. So when you're deciding, for instance, that you're going to ignore the doctor because they told you something that you did not necessarily like, was that coming from a love for yourself? Was that coming from fear?
Fear.
Because if you are in love with this beautiful body that God has given us for this journey on this planet, then my assertion is that you wouldn't necessarily just block out what a physician said or anybody said to you about your health and well-being and just keep on stepping, stick your head in the ground. All right? So it's really teaching about self-love and self-responsibility that is really the premise of your overall health and well-being. Yeah.
So now we talked about lifestyle changes. You had us to actually look at, like you said, the ownership that we had to take and the responsibility towards this lifestyle change. And so I was very interested in that because I know that that's a part of what I need to do. You know, the whole lifestyle change thing. Because like I said, the biggest issue that I had was that I can't do things the way that I did them before. And when I think about them, it's not like those things were good for me in the first place. But being that person that is resistant to change, I wanted to do it that way. You know, eating, you know, maybe foods that are too high in salt that I didn't think about. I thought that I was being healthy, but sometimes I would eat certain foods. Now when I look at the labels, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you know, I shouldn't have been eating that in the first place. So those types of things, and when you talked about the lifestyle change as far as our diets, even taking time out for yourself, making sure that you have time to do things that you enjoy, and how you are able to just balance things and say, well, does this need to be done, or am I just allowing people to just pull on me from different directions, and I'm trying to meet everybody's needs and I'm getting left out and I'm frustrated about it, you know, because a lot of times, you know, people become frustrated.
Yes, we take our frustrations out.
And learn to say no.
Those were some
when
things
that's okay to say no, because we don't need to say yes to everything.
Absolutely.
So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, the conversation that we had was really a springing board, and I mean, these ladies really came with a lot of powerful stuff, and it really shone a lot of light on some of the things that we tend to neglect, and I call them energy sappers. One of the things I work with my clients on, first up, is what I call creating a well-being checklist. And I usually like them to work on put in about 10 items, 10 daily items that they are going to do. Remember, I talked to you earlier about the fact that this is customized. This is not a cookie cutter kind of program. So I usually have them work on 10 items that they're going to commit to. And when I say commit, I don't want you thinking, oh my gosh, this is like, I got to do it, you know. But it's pretty much a checklist that you can check in and say, well, what are 10 things that would support my well-being? And when I mean well-being, I speak of spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. So the whole gamut, all in one basket. And imagine that you had this basket here, you know, sitting on this couch here with you. And that you could pick any one of these items throughout the day, right? So for instance, you know, a lot of people think about prayer and meditation, and light music, inspirational music as a source of well-being. So I usually invite my clients to create that list first up. Because let me say this, the first thing that's going to happen when you're trying to make a change is that you're going to have this stuff that comes up that resists it. For instance, let's face it, how many times have you committed to an exercise program or a diet program? Right? Probably many times, right?
Yes.
Countless times. And what's happened? Stuff has got in the way.
Yes.
Whether it was intentional or intentional. Now, my assertion is it's really intentional in the sense that when you want to create a shift in your life, the body, it's not the body, but inevitably we're stretching outside of our comfort zone. And so it's almost, think about it like an elastic band, like you're trying to go against resistance, right? So you're stretching, you have this big band around your waist. You're trying to stretch further, and meanwhile what this band is designed to do is to pull you back to least resistance. And so somehow when you are committed to making these changes, you're pushing against the resistance. And the design is to bring you back to what is normal and comfortable, what is inside your comfort zone. And for the most part, people are not psychologically prepared for that. So when it shows up like, oh, well, I really wanted to go to the gym after work, but my boss gave me some extra work to do, and I didn't see it in me to be able to have the power to say no. And so I stayed feeling totally victimized because I had to work late, and I'm probably not going to get paid for it anyway, rather than commit to my initial commitment to go to the gym. And what part of our work is first of all identifying how it's likely to go. So I like to ask my clients, well, you know, let's face it, you're not here for the first time talking about making a change in your life. We know it. You've probably tried the diet and exercise, you've probably tried to make these lifestyle changes, you've probably paid for some commercial programs, invested hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands even. What's going to be different this time? The first step is identifying how it's likely to go. So I like to ask my clients, how do you think it's going to go? And they're going to come up with, well, you know, I tried that diet program like 2 years ago, and yeah, it worked fine for the first week or two. And then it kind of got more expensive, and I kind of figured I could cook this food myself. And well, I didn't really pay attention to the portion sizes, and yeah, after some time I decided it wasn't worth it, right? Or it was the beginning of the year, and I was going to go to the gym 4 times a week, but you know, we had that major snowstorm in Chicago, and going to the gym is really such a drag, because then I got to figure out how to dig myself out, and well, I didn't really bargain on it, and then I tried doing the home video programs, but that P90X really sucks, and and so I ask, how is it likely to go? And you tell me how it's likely to go. And then what we do next is we set in structures and support structures, which is really where your coach comes in, to help support you through that resistance.
This is the last component that I needed to get some control and manage my conditions. And I'm just looking forward to working with you.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Thank you for receiving me as well.
Thank you. Thank you for thinking of me, and thanks for sharing your journey with me, and I look forward to being on your team.
Thank you for joining me. Until next time, to God be the glory. You can be a part of the Everyday Matters conversation. Send a link of your YouTube video to Everyday Matters at everydaymatterstv.net. Join us today.
Where they see themselves in 5